Hi everyone, my name is Hermina and I'm a graduate student in history at Rutgers Camden. I'm going to be telling you guys a little bit today about my journey to Rutgers Camden, what the experience like was my first year, and it's what my experience is currently, and some advice and tips that I have for you guys. I will be kind of sprinkling in the advice and tips throughout, so it's not going to be kind of an all at the end kind of thing. But I ended up in my program because I was working at a nonprofit for 3 years right after my bachelor's degree. So I kind of took a non-traditional path, mostly because I was a first generation student going into undergraduate school. And I am from upstate New York too. Kind of, this is important to the story. And I've only ever known upstate New York. So I went to a local school back in Utica, New York, and did my bachelor's. And then I worked in my community that I grew up and knew um, for the local nonprofit that I worked at. And what I ended up doing when I decided to go to graduate school is I was talking to my mentor at the time that told me, he's like, you should be looking at PhD programs, you should be looking at research because you want to do more and you can't do more at a small local nonprofit because they don't have the resources and the capacity to answer the kind of questions that you want to do. And I remember that being such a hard thing for me to do because I didn't know what life looked like for me after making that choice. I just was driven by wanting to do more research. And in fact, I didn't even know that I would land the job at the nonprofit that I did back home because when I was in undergrad, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I was interested in policy and social change, and I really wanted to stop violence. So, all of my research in undergrad, I spent my time looking at policies, specifically for gender violence. So, I was looking at Title IX, and many of you may know that Title IX is in college institutions, but it's also supposed to cover K through 12 institutions, and it covers gender violence and dating violence. And I saw a gap for K through 12 schools in my area, and that we needed to fill that, right? Because I was really impacted in how people can be traumatized even more if certain policies aren't enforced or put in place, and what does that look like, and how do we stop that violence? What I didn't know was in that internship experience I would actually learn, like, hey, there's all these intersections, because once I got that hands-on, like on the ground experience in my communities, like that there was all these different types of violences intersecting, right? So it wasn't just gender violence, it was racial violence, it was um, economic violence. It was different things that were going on around a community that needed to be addressed, but it could be addressed through policy. And, not a lot of people like to spend that time and go into the archives, like, how did this policy develop? Or did it cause harm? And why is it causing harm? And I was really also interested in looking at things from a global perspective, which of course you can't do at a small nonprofit if you're just in one area, because you get specific funding and all those different things. So that led me to apply to PhD programs on a whim because I was like, okay, let's just see what it looks like. And I remember the day that I found, like, Rutgers had a slate of professors in history. First, I also thought I would be in policy, which sometimes I'm like in between two spaces because I'm still a policy person, but I ended up in history because the history program was very, very interdisciplinary at Rutgers, and that's what attracted me. I really, really wanted a space where, like, we're taking historical methods, we're looking at different things, and how they developed, whether it's nationalism, whether it's different things like policies, and how does that create the violence that we see today in certain spaces. So I applied to PhD programs, and then I got an email one day, and I was on my lunch break, and I was like, I thought it was spam. I was like, who is this? And it ended up being my graduate advisor. And he was like, your program like meets all the requirements for like a graduate student like that would be taking our program. He received my application from someone, and he basically offered me a fellowship. But what attracted me the most is that he had a slate of professors under him that were studying exactly all the different things I wanted to study. So they were looking at issues of colonialism, they were looking at issues of racism, they were looking at issues of violence and policy and all these different things, and how do we mitigate that using historical methods, right? What do we do to change these things? And how do we look to the past to kind of solve the present? And I was just so like, like, this is amazing. I gotta go. They seem very rigorous. And then I remember they gave me the fellowship offer, and I remember coming down to campus and meeting everybody, and I was just so impressed. The other thing that I was very impressed by is that, like, like I thought when I went there that I was just putting on a happy face because they wanted me to go there, but nobody's like demeanor changed since I was in the first year to like now I'm in my second year. It was like really a space for me that I felt seen and I felt heard, and I could talk about the topics that I wanted to address, and I could talk about the research that I wanted to do and take it further. So I was able to take like the small like little research that I had, kind of develop it through the work that I did at the nonprofit to go deeper in a different space, and to even have it talk about global issues, which is like something that I dreamed about as a little girl, but I never thought would happen, and I never thought like anything like this existed. So I am just so grateful for my faculty, and I'm so grateful for like the experience that I had. Um, I think now I'm gonna get into the parts that are like not so happy. And that really was like navigating what does graduate school look like? How do you pay for graduate school? And what do you do when like you don't know everything, like the ropes and stuff like that. So I remember my first year I struggled a lot because I had to like understand how to write at the graduate level, and I was so scared. Like I remember like I can't do this. Like I kept telling myself I'm not going to be able to finish this. Like this is like the end all. And I remember my professor telling me about the graduate writing assistant and all these other resources, and that just like opened up the door for so many other resources on campus. So I went to the graduate writing assistant, and she helped me through so much, and I was able to get through that within my first year, and then find a community and space to feel supported. That like, hey, you're not alone in this. And then I remember going to a lot of different networking events where I was able to like not only meet other people, but I was able to get more jobs. And that was like another thing that I was worried about. Like, yeah, I had the fellowship, but like I didn't have the other stuff to like supplement like the financial costs of like having a graduate degree, but also like needing all these other things, right? I went from having a full-time job and full-time pay to like nothing. Well, it's like not nothing, but it's like, kind of like a graduate student salary with just like part-time pay and stuff like that. So I was kind of scared what that would look like. But again, the campus had so many resources, and they actually had this on-campus job fair where I got both of my jobs. I first started out working in the community, mentoring youth in Camden through the RU Ignite program, and that like was my wheelhouse. I really loved working with the students, and then I had to shift my second semester towards a job at admissions, at the contact center working at undergraduate admissions, and I love that job so much, and it also just helped that I was on campus and not constantly out in the community my second semester because I was doing a lot more heavy research for my school. And I really thought they were joking when they told me like I couldn't have a full-time job. I was like, there's no way like I'm gonna have a full-time job. And then I was like, oh no, it's because your research becomes a full-time job. And I think that's the toughest thing you have to navigate, especially for someone that's like, you're transitioning from being in the field and like knowing like, you have this set kind of life to like going back to graduate school and like not understanding how to navigate the financial costs. And I think the other thing that I really loved about our campus is that like there is graduate housing, so that means it's covered by loans, and that helped me a lot because I was so scared that I wasn't going to find housing, and I was like, if I did find housing, it'd be through the roof, because we're in between so many major cities. Like, how do you find affordable housing? And on top of that, though, like even if you do live off campus as a graduate student, there's like different communities that people have built. So like I was also exploring like living off campus for the summer, before I decided to go home. But like there's so many different people that are always looking for roommates, and some people that are supportive and wanting, to just help each other out, and like it's just grad school life. You'll have to room with someone at one point. Um, and I think the last thing I want to talk about is like something that people don't really talk about is like the mental health and like other accessible resources we do have on campus. Um, as someone that was like very like rooted in her community, knew where she was, knew everything about where she grew up for how long she grew up there. Um, I transitioned to New Jersey, and especially like transitioning to like small cities surrounded by rural spaces to like big city, big city, big city everywhere, and not knowing what that felt like. I was so scared. I felt like very ungrounded. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know the people in my community, and I didn't learn the people in my community until I got my job as a mentor, where I felt like, okay, now I understand the lay of the land. What does everything look like? Um, and I got to connect with other people. But before that, I was like very emotionally nervous. I was very scared, and I was always like not myself, is what it felt like. So I remember getting connected to the mental health resources, and that helped me through so much. Within my first semester, it's just like helped like okay, I went from here to being like all over the place to like here I'm this like I got this kind of level, like grounded level, like you can navigate these different things, and it's not as scary as you think it might be. So that helped me a lot. And then the other thing is like we also have a food pantry on campus, which a lot of people go to, and I think that helped me a lot because within not like I did have my fellowship, which like you get a stipend and stuff like that, but I was like without a second job that helped me support my other aspects of my financial life, you know, like laundry supplies, stuff like that. That was like the scariest moment of time was like that month in between I didn't have my second job, and then like having to navigate that, but the food pantry helped me out so much, on top of like the meal plan that we have for campus because like you know I was able to get other supplies there like laundry supplies and stuff like that that I may have not gotten if that food pantry was not there. And I think I'm gonna end with some piece like small takeaways from this is like you're gonna go through a process like within your first year that you're gonna question everything. You're gonna be like, why am I doing this? You might have breakdowns, like that's what happened to me. Um, and you are gonna go through so much intense, rigorous training, whatever program you're in. It's not just like the history program, but you're going to get through the other side. And I think if you know that, and if you keep that vision that you're going to be on the other side, understand that the person that you are now is not the person you're going to end up when you get to the first year or even the first semester because you're going to come out stronger. And I think never lose sight of that. And I think the second piece of advice that I would end with is like build community. Like I don't care if you have to like download like a friends app or something where you meet friends in Philly or something like that and you don't want to meet anybody from campus, make community because that's what's going to make or break how you feel on campus. And I'm going to tell you guys the craziest story was last semester. I was just gone. Like, I don't know if I was going to survive finals. Like, I was just over it. I've never been through that. And was like, I thought undergrad was like undergrad seems easy compared to what you go through in grad school now, even though you're taking way more classes in undergrad. But my friends and I, we just had it, and we were all just like, we can't do this anymore. And we all had some time, so we just went and drove to Atlantic City just to look at the water at 1 a.m. And I kid you not, we came back home at 3 a.m. the next day, and we all just ended up sleeping, and just taking a break from everything. And I don't think I would have done any of those things if it wasn't for my friends supporting me, helping me through every single thing. And I cannot stress that enough is build that support network. The other thing too is I would have family visit me, and I guess I would end up with that. It's like don't be afraid to have your family visit you. Don't feel like your schoolwork is like just always has to be everything that you want to do. You also deserve fun and you deserve rest. And your family and your friends matter, because your emotional and social wealth matters. So, yeah, I hope you guys were able to gain something and thank you for your time.